Friday night, November 17, 1978. A small-town fast food joint seconds away from closing. 4 teenagers still in uniforms, counting cash, cleaning up, then vanished. No screams, no alarms, just silence. By dawn, their families wait. By Sunday afternoon, their bodies are discovered, executed in a remote forest 20 miles away. Shot, stabbed, beaten, $581 taken, but watches and money left on their bodies. Was this a robbery gone wrong? Or something darker? Decades later, investigators believe they know who killed them, but physical evidence vanishes with time. Today, we peel back layers of mistakes, hidden motives, and brutal violence. Speedway, Indiana, 1978. A quiet, working-class town nestled just west of Indianapolis. Known mostly for its racetrack, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Not for crime, not for fear, not for tragedy, but in the fall of 1978, Speedway was already starting to lose its innocence. Earlier that summer, a woman named Julia Cyphers had been murdered in her garage. No one knew why. Then came a string of unsolved bombings, 8 in total, shaking the nerves of a place that wasn't used to locking its doors. Still, life went on. Teenagers worked part-time jobs. Parents raised their kids. And on the night of Friday, November 17th, 4 young employees at the local burger chef clocked in for a normal evening shift. Jane Freet, 20 years old. The assistant manager, responsible, driven, a natural leader, described by coworkers as dependable and kind. She'd recently been promoted and took pride in running the store. Daniel Davis, just 16, a quiet, well-liked boy, still figuring out the world. This was one of his first real jobs. He wasn't the type to make waves. He just wanted to do a good job and make some money. Ruth Ellen Shelton, 17, bright, soft-spoken, and academic. She loved science and had dreams of going to college. Everyone said she was sweet, thoughtful, too gentle for what was about to happen. And then there was Mark Flemons, also 16, athletic, energetic, the kind of kid who'd go out of his way to help a friend. He wasn't even supposed to be working that night. He was covering for someone else. That one decision changed everything. The shift was winding down. It was a slow Friday night. Around 11 p.m., the restaurant was nearing closing time. The team was finishing up, wiping counters, locking up the safe, taking out the trash. No one saw what happened next. A coworker who had stopped by the restaurant shortly after midnight found the place eerily quiet. The front door was unlocked, the back door left open. The lights were still on, but no one was there. The safe had been emptied, a few $100s gone, and 2 empty currency bags lay nearby. An empty roll of tape was found on the floor. The employees' jackets and purses were still inside. The register drawers still held over $100 in coins. And yet, no sign of a struggle. Police arrived shortly after, and they got it all wrong. They assumed the teens had taken the money and gone out partying. No blood, no bodies, just an open safe, a few missing kids, and $581 in cash. They didn't photograph the scene. They didn't cordon it off. In fact, they let Burger Chef reopen for business that morning. Employees came in, cleaned, wiped down the counters, took out the trash. They erased the crime scene. Officer Buddy Ellwanger, who later worked the case, would eventually admit, "We screwed it up from the beginning." Saturday morning came. Families woke to find their children still missing. Their calls went unanswered. Jane's car, a Chevrolet Vega, was found abandoned, partially locked, in downtown Speedway. No sign of the kids. Now the police took it seriously. The theory changed. This wasn't some late-night joyride. This was a robbery, a kidnapping, and as hours turned into days, it became something far worse. Sunday, November 19th, 1978. It had now been nearly 36 hours since anyone had heard from Jane, Daniel, Ruth, or Mark. The small town of Speedway, Indiana, was waking up to a dark truth. 4 young lives had vanished. And something was very, very wrong. What began as a mild concern was quickly turning into collective panic. By Sunday afternoon, the air was heavy with tension. Local police were finally beginning to accept what the families already knew in their hearts. This wasn't a runaway case. This wasn't teenagers blowing off steam. This was a crime violent, calculated, and cruel. And then came the call. 2 hikers, exploring the wooded hills of Johnson County, about 20 miles south of Speedway, stumbled across something they could never unsee. Lying scattered among the brush, still in their burger chef uniforms, were 4 bodies. Jane Freed, Daniel Davis, Ruth Shelton, Mark Flemons, all murdered, all dumped like garbage. The details were horrific. Ruth and Daniel had both been shot multiple times with a .38 caliber revolver. Their wounds were clean, but fatal, quick, and cold. Jane Freed, the assistant manager, had been stabbed twice in the chest. During the autopsy, the blade was found lodged in her body, but the knife handle was missing. Mark Flemons, the teen who wasn't even scheduled to work that night, had suffered the worst. He had been beaten, bludgeoned with a blunt object, possibly a chain, and he choked to death on his own blood. Each method of killing was different, messy, chaotic, almost like the killers weren't in sync, or were panicking, or worse, enjoying it. And yet, none of the victims had been robbed. Money and personal items were found on their bodies. Their watches, jewelry, wallets untouched. So if this was a robbery, why kill them? Unless the real motive had never been money at all. Police scrambled to put the timeline together. Something had gone down at that burger chef between 11 p.m. and midnight on Friday. Something that ended in murder. Based on the position of the safe, the location of the back door, and the general condition of the scene, investigators theorized that the employees were taken by surprise, most likely as they were finishing their closing duties. There were no signs of forced entry, no blood in the restaurant, no smashed windows or broken locks. It was as if the kids had simply walked out the door. Perhaps they were led at gunpoint. Or perhaps, at first, they trusted the people who came in. Then came a break, a sliver of a lead. A 16-year-old eyewitness came forward. He had been near the burger chef around closing time that Friday night and saw something unusual. 2 men sitting in a car in the parking lot. They weren't customers. They weren't employees. They were just watching. Both were white, in their 30s. One clean-shaven with light or fair hair. The other with a full beard. Something about them felt off. The kind of people who don't fit in, but don't care. Clay models were made. Composite sketches circulated. Police went door to door. Tip lines flooded. But every time they thought they had something, someone passed a polygraph. Someone skipped town. Someone just vanished. And then came the gut punch. The full crime scene at Burger Chef had been cleaned before forensic teams ever got the chance to examine it. The floor had been mopped. Counters wiped down. The trash taken out. Key evidence was lost forever. Buddy Ellwanger, the officer who had first responded, later admitted in interviews, it looked like they just left. And we didn't realize until it was too late that we were standing in the middle of a murder scene. What was left behind was barely enough. 2 empty currency bags, an empty roll of adhesive tape, a few coins, and silence. No fingerprints, no weapon, no witnesses, no motive, except for the eerie fact that one of the victims, Mark Flemons, wasn't even supposed to be working that night. Mark had taken someone else's shift, a last-minute favor, a small decision with devastating consequences. Investigators wondered, did Mark recognize someone? Was he the reason everything escalated? Was his unexpected presence what triggered the violence? For the families, this wasn't just a police investigation. It was the beginning of a life sentence of grief. No warning, no explanation. Just 4 empty chairs at the dinner table, and a crime that left an entire community asking, how does something like this happen in a place like Speedway? In the days after the bodies were found, Speedway transformed from a quiet suburb into the center of a frenzied homicide investigation. Police departments from surrounding counties joined the effort. The FBI got involved. Detectives began canvassing neighborhoods, tracking tips, and re-interviewing anyone who had stepped foot near that burger chef in the days prior. But they were already behind. Key evidence destroyed. The crime scene? Gone. All they had left were 4 bodies, a handful of forensic fragments, and the clay busts of 2 suspicious men who had been seen lurking outside the restaurant just before the disappearances. The clean-shaven man with the light-colored hair. The bearded man with piercing eyes. White, 30-something. Sitting in a car with no clear reason to be there. They became the investigation's center of gravity. Soon, a rumor began to circulate. A man had been overheard in a bar in nearby Greenwood, bragging that he'd been involved in the burger chef murders. Investigators jumped. They brought the man in, interrogated him, gave him a polygraph. He passed no confession, no arrest. But he did give them names of men allegedly involved in a fast food robbery ring. According to him, it wasn't the first time they'd hit a restaurant like Burger Chef. They knew the routines, the cash schedules, the back exits, and the cops started to believe maybe this wasn't a random act of violence. One by one, detectives began to dig into the suspects. In Franklin, police spotted a man who bore a striking resemblance to the bearded man composite. When asked to participate in a suspect lineup, the man agreed. But the night before he was scheduled to appear, he shaved off the beard he had kept for 5 years. Just like that, the resemblance faded. Another associate named by the same informant fit the description of the fair man. He'd already been in prison for multiple armed robberies of fast food joints. A third associate had also served time, but nobody confessed. No fingerprints matched. No murder weapon was ever found. And despite plea deals offered to anyone not directly responsible for the killings, none of the suspects talked. It was like chasing ghosts. Then came another twist. The town had already been on edge. You see, in the months leading up to the Burger Chef killings, Speedway had been shaken by a wave of terror. Earlier that summer, Julia Cyphers, an elderly local woman, was found murdered in her own garage. Her death sent a ripple through the neighborhood. Just weeks later, a series of 8 homemade bombs began exploding around the town. Mailboxes, cars, a random string of chaos. The bomber? Unidentified. Some began to wonder, was this all connected? A serial killer? A violent gang? Was Speedway being targeted by something darker than anyone could imagine? But in time, investigators ruled it out. The Julia Cyphers case and the Speedway bombings were eventually deemed unrelated. Yet the tension in the town only grew. Back inside the investigation, frustration was mounting. Tips dried up. Witnesses grew quiet. And soon, the suspects stopped cooperating. Some moved, some disappeared. Some died. One of the men named by the Greenwood bar informant died of an apparent heart attack shortly after one of his former robbery associates was released from prison. Another, possibly the bearded suspect, was reported to have committed suicide not long after investigators began closing in again. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe someone was cleaning up loose ends. Ken York, one of the original detectives on the case, believed there was more to those deaths than coincidence. But with no physical evidence to tie any of the suspects directly to the crime scene, his hands were tied. Meanwhile, The families were left in the dark. Year after year, they'd get calls from reporters, tips from strangers, sometimes even prank messages claiming to know who killed their children. Every time the phone rang, hope was crushed all over again. Every dead end added another layer of grief, and the trail kept getting colder. 6 years had passed since the night 4 teenagers vanished from a burger chef in Speedway, Indiana. 6 years of silence, 6 years of grief, and 6 years of investigators chasing a case that felt like it had already slipped through their fingers. Then, in 1984, out of nowhere, a man stepped forward. His name was Donald Forrester, a career criminal, a man with a history of violence, domestic abuse, and a long rap sheet of burglaries and assault. But this time, he didn't deny anything. He confessed. He told detectives he knew exactly what happened the night of November 17, 1978. And even more chilling, he said he was there. According to Forrester, the murders weren't supposed to happen. It had started out as a robbery, just another stick-up gone wrong. He claimed that Mark Flemings had tried to play hero, that during the struggle, he had recognized one of the attackers. And that single moment sealed their fate. The teenagers couldn't be left alive. Forrester gave names, people he said were involved. He described in detail how each victim died, how they were driven out to the woods, how Ruth was the last to die, how her final screams echoed through the trees before it all went silent. He even agreed to take detectives to the exact spot where the murders occurred. With detectives watching, he walked them to the location, just outside Johnson County, without hesitation. He pointed to where each body had been found. He knew the layout, the distances, the positioning. It was convincing. Too convincing to ignore. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't want a deal. And for the first time in years, detectives felt like they were finally staring at the truth. But then, just days later, everything fell apart. Donald Forrester recanted. He claimed the police had coerced him, that he'd been pressured into confessing to protect himself in prison, that the whole story was a lie. Detectives pushed back. They had the tapes. They had the walkthrough. They had his voice describing details no one outside the department had ever known. But there was a problem. No physical evidence tied Forrester to the crime scene. No DNA, no fingerprints, no murder weapon. And with no corroborating witness willing to testify, prosecutors had nothing solid to hold him on. The confession was tossed. Donald Forrester was never charged with the burger chef murders. In the years that followed, he became a ghost in the investigation, a name whispered in true crime circles, always with an asterisk next to it. Was he telling the truth the first time? Or was he just another manipulator craving attention? Some believed Forrester knew more than he was ever willing to admit. Others thought he simply fed off the headlines. After all, he'd been caught bragging in prison before, claiming to know things he didn't. But one detail kept haunting detectives. During the walkthrough, Forrester had reached down and pulled a shell casing out of the dirt. It matched the type of bullets used in the murders. But was that luck? A setup? Or the smoking gun they had longed for? They couldn't prove it either way. Then, in 2006, Donald Forrester died in prison from cancer. Whatever secrets he carried died with him. He never spoke of the burger chef murders again. And just like that, the most promising lead in the burger chef murders collapsed. The families, once again, were left without closure. The case once again was left unsolved. To this day, detectives don't know whether to believe Donald Forrester. Some say he was their killer. Others say he was just a master manipulator who destroyed what little hope the families had left. Was it really Donald Forrester? Was there someone else? Did someone walk free all these years shopping in the same stores, sitting in the same movie theaters, smiling in church pews, carrying a secret so dark it still chills an entire town? Or was it a combination of people none of whom ever feared being caught because they knew too much time had passed. The truth, if it exists, is buried deep, somewhere between silence, fear, and forgotten evidence. But the families haven't forgotten, and neither has Speedway. To this day, the case remains officially unsolved, a permanent shadow cast over a once quiet town, and the Burger Chef murders remain one of the most haunting, tragic mysteries in American true crime history. If you know something, even now say something. It's never too late to bring justice. It's never too late to speak for the voiceless. Subscribe to Vanished and Unsolved for more true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.